At exactly 2,818 feet above New York City, something ancient and fragile collided with something engineered to defy gravity. A flock of Canada geese rose from the Hudson River basin, heavy birds, some weighing more than 10 pounds each, lifting into the same airspace as a climbing Airbus A320. They were not supposed to be there. The aircraft was not supposed to meet them. And modern jet engines were not supposed to fail because of birds. But within seconds, both engines inhaled life. Inside the left engine, the first bird struck the fan blades at over 400 knots. The impact shattered feathers, bone, and flesh into a cloud that rushed deeper into the engine core. Sensors detected a sudden pressure imbalance. The engine surged. Flames shot from the exhaust. The cockpit shook. Before the crew could process what they were seeing, the right engine followed. Another bird. Then another. Then silence where thrust should have been. 2 engines. 0 power. There was no explosion. No dramatic sound. Just a sudden absence. The quiet terror pilots fear most. The Airbus was climbing away from LaGuardia Airport, less than a minute into flight. Landing gear had just been retracted. Flaps were transitioning. The aircraft was heavy with fuel. There was no excess altitude, no excess speed, and no margin. This was the exact phase of flight where failure is least survivable. Inside the cockpit, Captain Chesley, Sully, Sullenberger and First Officer Jeffrey Skiles saw both engine instruments roll back almost simultaneously. Exhaust gas temperature spiked, then collapsed. N1 and N2 RPMs fell towards 0. The engines were no longer producing thrust. They were windmilling, spitting uselessly in the airflow. This was not a textbook failure. Engines are certified to survive bird strikes. Every modern turbofan is tested by firing birds into it, real birds, at high speed. But those tests assume one thing, one engine at a time. The certification rules never required an engine to survive swallowing an entire flock at climb thrust. And nature does not follow certification rules. The Airbus A320 had lost both engines at low altitude, over one of the most densely populated cities on Earth. For a brief moment, nobody spoke. The aircraft began to decelerate. The nose dropped slightly, as the fly-by-wire system tried to preserve airflow over the wings. The airplane was still flying, but it was now a glider. A very heavy glider. First Officer Skiles reached for the engine relight checklist. It was muscle memory. That checklist assumed a single engine failure. It assumed altitude. It assumed time. None of those assumptions were true. The auxiliary power unit was started to restore electrical stability. Airflow was redirected. Ignition systems were armed. Fuel switches cycled. The engines responded with nothing. The birds had not merely damaged the engines. They had destroyed them. Molten debris and organic matter clogged compressor stages. The engines could not compress air. Without compression, there could be no combustion. Without combustion, there was no thrust. At that moment, air traffic control was still unaware of the full scope of the disaster. "Cactus 1549, the controller said. "Turn left heading 220. The request assumed a functioning airplane. Sullenberger replied calmly, with a sentence that instantly changed the trajectory of everyone listening. We've had a bird strike. We've lost thrust in both engines." In aviation history, that sentence almost never exists. Controllers immediately offered nearby airports. Return to LaGuardia. Divert to Teterboro. Runways were close, on paper. But paper does not account for physics. The Airbus was descending faster than the options could converge. Every second without thrust reduced the aircraft's energy state. The glide ratio was finite. The airplane could not stretch distance the way jet pilots are trained to expect. Sullenberger ran the numbers in his head, not mathematically, but instinctively. Years of flying had taught him what performance charts sometimes hide. The aircraft would not reach LaGuardia. It would not reach Teterboro. It would not clear the buildings. And beneath them was Manhattan. There was no simulator scenario for this. No training video. No checklist line that said. There was only judgment. As the aircraft passed the George Washington Bridge, it was already clear that land was no longer an option. The Hudson River stretched ahead, wide, flat, cold. Water is unforgiving. At jet speeds, it behaves like concrete. But it was the only surface without buildings, people, or bridges. Sullenberger made the decision without drama. "We're going to be in the Hudson." The words were not heroic. They were factual. Inside the cabin, passengers felt the aircraft descending unnaturally. The engines were silent. There was no familiar roar. Just wind noise and the creak of structure under stress. Flight attendants moved quickly. Commands were shouted. Brace positions demonstrated. There was no time for panic, only action. Back in the cockpit, the aircraft was configured for the impossible. Flaps extended manually to improve lift at low speed. Airspeed was managed precisely. Too slow and the aircraft would stall. Too fast, and it would disintegrate on impact. The Airbus crossed the river's edge lower than many buildings it passed. Seconds stretched. Then the aircraft touched water. The impact was violent but controlled. The fuselage struck flat. The wings absorbed energy. The engines tore away as designed. Water surged upward, ripping open the aircraft's underside. But it stayed intact. The cabin filled with icy water. Passengers climbed onto wings. Ferries and boats converged almost immediately. Against every statistical expectation, everyone survived. The world would later call it a miracle. But the miracle was not the landing. The miracle happened 20 seconds earlier, when two engines failed in a way they were never designed to survive, and a crew recognized reality faster than procedures. Those birds did not cause a crash because of negligence or maintenance failure. They exposed a blind spot in modern aviation, the assumption that redundancy always protects. After the incident, engine certification standards were reevaluated. Simulator scenarios were updated. Wildlife management around airports intensified. But one truth remains unchanged. No system is truly redundant when nature strikes at the wrong moment. At 2,800 feet, with no thrust and no time, the margin between disaster and survival was not technology. It was judgment and silence.